All right. Well, guys, thank you for joining us today. This is Centro's think tank topic on the new rules of advertising, mobile advertising, hyperlocal or bust. To set the premise up for you today, today we're going to walk through a little bit on how the rules of mobile advertising are changing, why they're changing, and what you need to know. We'll frame the market landscape as I see it, or as the company sees it first. Then we'll kind of walk you through the new rules, the old rules, I should say, of mobile advertising, kind of give you a sense of where the industry was a couple of years ago. And then we'll contrast that with the new rules. We'll give you a couple of examples, and then we'll have my colleague Ratko come up to provide you with a live demonstration. So let's get started. So my name is Tom Burg. I run the product marketing department at Centro. We are a Chicago-based ad tech software and services company based out of Chicago. We've had the good fortune in that time to work for 2,000 agencies, 6,000 brands, and I believe we're coming up on about 200,000 campaigns successfully delivered. It's also been a really nice week for Centro this week. 2 days ago, we were announced as the best place in advertising to work for in the United States. And yesterday, we announced a Series B, a $30 million fundraise from Neuberger Berman. So that's really exciting. So let's get into it. I don't think this comes as any surprise, but digital media, we're in the middle of a profound evolution. It's really tough to keep up with at times. I think a few weeks ago at Centro, we were talking about this as a team and thinking, we haven't very often internally categorized what has changed, what used to happen, what we should begin doing, and that's really the basis of the presentation today. The growth formats that we've aligned in yellow, ad exchanges have really presented the majority of the uptick in spend, but social, video, and mobile buying have also been really critical. I think what those growth formats share, they're more immersive, they're more targetable, they tend to use more data in a way that the sort of predecessor formats did not. And I think as programmatic takes hold, you're going to see, frankly, much more growth in those areas. So I think it's clear that mobile advertising is already enormously important. I also think there are several trends which will make it even more so, and let's walk through that a little bit. So I think the first trend is the massive movement of mobile dollars to programmatic. I think these numbers even have surprised me in just how quickly this has come up. I think we've seen projected between 2013 and 2016 an 11-fold increase in the amount of dollars spent to mobile programmatic. This year was the first year that mobile programmatic is now the lion's share of programmatic spending at 55%. Next year it should get to almost 70%. And I think the number on the bottom right is critical. So 1 in 4 marketers suggest that they will significantly increase spend in mobile programmatic. If you think about all the folks who expect some amount of spend, that number will rise to 62%. So trends are definitely in that favor. I think the reason for the shift is what you see here. I think advertisers need to be where their customers and prospects are. Right now, what you're seeing is ComScore announced, I think late last year, 60% of all mobile dollars, 60% of all time spent online is done on a mobile device. If you take into account the amount of time spent accessing the web in a multi-screen format, that really raises up to about 90%. The reality is people only really accessing the internet from their desktop represents about 1 in 10 or 10%. So it's something to really keep track of. So what I'd call out here is, across all ad spend, in 2014, 10% was allocated to mobile, 18% was allocated to display. In 2013, the mobile number was actually 4%. So that was really the first time you started to see a pretty significant increase. TV has stayed roughly the same. What you're starting to see, though, is mobile is going to start stealing share from every channel not named TV. It should overtake display next year, and you'll see a slight decrease of spend across all the other formats. I think what's interesting here is the reason for, I think, the growth in mobile is also attributable to there's two ways to spend via mobile. There's local spend, which we'll get into in a little bit. There's also national spend. And what you'll see here is the local spend is really responsible for the growth, or driving much of the growth between 2015 and 2019. I think what's happening is the definition of local is becoming less about neighborhood or mom and pop shops advertising to the community, but it's really about location now. It's really about understanding where a consumer is at a particular time, and really thinking about the way that advertisers, both big and small, can access that consumer. I guess lastly, I think, we talk about this all the time, but this is a little bit inevitable. That's supposed to be a washing machine if you can't see it. But I think more and more devices are becoming targetable. The definition of mobile will expand. I think your car is likely to become a mobile targeted device fairly soon. Your refrigerator, for example, I think Tropicana a few years from now might sense, or your refrigerator might sense that you're running low on OJ, and Tropicana may want to incent you to move away from Tropicana or Minute Maid. All right, so those are the trends. I wanted to switch it up a little bit and talk to you today about the old school versus the new school rules of mobile. So we're supposed to have a little fun here. Change happens so quickly. Like I said, there's a way of doing things that is quickly changing that I'm not sure that the industry is as up to speed on as it could be. The key thing to remember here is that the new rules don't make everything necessarily better or easier. There are new challenges to think through, but having a good understanding of what they are will help you make the right decision. So let's take a look. So the old school rules. It was understood that mobile was immature. It was technically and creatively challenging. I speak from experience. It has been fairly safe to ignore if you were at a big box DSP, etc., over the last few years. With old school rule number one, I think the intent was to get eyeballs wherever you could. Few people had smartphones. Very few utilized apps. Mobile was historically considered a reach and frequency play to ensure your ad was seen by the same people wherever they went. The second rule, the name of the game was automation. So because of the lack of quality targeting mechanisms for mobile, the key idea was to be able to automate and batch messaging to as many people as possible. I think about back in a few years ago where mobile newsletters were seriously considered as a way to get your message in front of people, and how antiquated or outdated that seems today. The third rule was what I would call the broadside of the barn rule, which was close enough as well close enough. The predominant way in which you would try to find somebody was through an IP address. There's limitations with IP addresses. It's typically accurate to the state level. The example I would say is a Chicago retailer who wants to drive people in store back in the day, maybe presenting their message to somebody who is a 3 or 4 hour car ride away, and I can't imagine that's a very good use of that budget. With old school rule number 4, I guess, focus on reach, because there was really no strong sense of understanding the impact. An inability to use cookies to track mobile users had its challenges. It hindered the promise of cross-channel advertising. Speaking from experience, connecting the data for mobile campaigns to the rest of your campaigns was challenging, if not impossible. And as marketers will understand, if you can't measure something, you don't know the impact of it, you're not going to be able to budget for it. And I think that brings us to sort of the collective rule. I think we were in a perpetual state of testing with mobile because it was challenging. The creative was a nightmare. The tech was a mess. Just even training the optimization teams, account management teams, what have you, always proved challenging because it was much easier to run display campaigns than it might be for mobile. So I feel like we were in almost a perpetual state of testing, which is kind of falling by the wayside. So to recap, I think the goals a few years ago were eyeballs anywhere and everywhere. Location sharing apps, what's that? There weren't very many. Nobody had much experience with them, especially targeting them. Pretty close was close enough. The more you reach, the better you do, and I think collectively mobile historically was a maybe. But I think in the last 2 years, a lot has changed. I think the landscape has changed. I think the rules are changing, and we'll kind of get into a few of them as well. So I think the first new school rule, which I think everybody in this room understands. I see half of you actually on your phone at the moment. So I think it goes without saying that we're in a moment of saturation. I think mobile phone usage has effectively doubled in the last 4 years. I speak from experience, like looking at commercials these days. I see a lot of major carriers reducing prices. The only way you're going to gain subscribers these days is to really steal them from your competitors, and the only thing they've really got going for them is price, which is good news for the consumer, but not so good for the carriers. The second rule, which is a profound change, which is mobile audience targeting. Mobile audience building is really not longer about cookies. It's migrated to targeting mobile device IDs, which really provides several advantages relative to the way you used to do it. Primarily, it ensures you're reaching the same person. It's measuring app downloads. It's measuring usage. It's actually allowing you to target the right person as opposed to hopefully the right person. I think the key differentiator with device ID targeting is it allows you to target on the go as opposed to targeting against a Wi-Fi network. It gives you much more flexibility in what you can do there. New school rule number 3. I think this is another profound change we're in the middle of right now. I think you're seeing a lot of evidence that consumers are understanding and thinking through the trade-off between privacy and relevancy. I think, as anybody can attest, if you are on Waze or Google Maps or Yelp or OpenTable, what have you, to not enable location tracking represents a pretty mundane experience in a way that location tracking really helps. I think the key here is to offer something that is relevant and timely. You're offering an exchange. I think the value exchange has to be good to great. If you're able to do that, I think I would call your guys' attention. There's an ebook out by IPG Media Brands from last month. They had polled, I think, 1,000 mobile UK consumers and asking them, what is your willingness to accept location-based advertisements? And if they were, based on timeliness, relevancy, offers, discounts, etc., you saw about 6 in 10 agreeing to accept those ads. But again, it has to be on that fair, good to great value exchange. And then number 4, I think, gone are the days of massive national mobile media buys for a lot of advertisers. I think it's important to think about location targeting with a scalpel, not a hammer. You can target hundreds or thousands of specific locations. If you're a major big box retailer, grocery store, what have you, you don't have to do national buys anymore. I think we did a little in-house research recently, and our business affords us an opportunity to take a look at a lot of the inventory marketplaces, and we estimated that something like 44% of all mobile programmatic inventory is location aware or includes the use of GPS coordinates. And we did a little back of the envelope math, I think, and that comes out to about 7 billion impressions a day. So getting the ability to really target people that way is pretty cool. And then, I think it pleases me. I've been in this industry for over 10, 12 years now, as mobile is finally, or becoming finally, part of the cross-channel family. Syncing identities between devices is now possible. Mobile audiences can be created and targeted from collecting mobile device IDs. In the Centro DSP, you can batch upload that, which makes it a lot easier. And understanding conversions on mobile is now possible with the use of server-side tracking or conversion tracking. So the sort of the full loop is now in play. So the new school recap. So smartphone use is a given commodity. It's about device IDs, not cookies. Trading data for relevance is where we're in as an industry right now. Targeting is more precise than ever, and mobile is no longer a maybe, it's a must. But as I said, I don't think that it's automatically where everything is easier and better. I think it's just a little bit of a separate set of challenges. I think new technology and tactics are required to make the most of these new rules. And I think at Centro, we broadly define that solution as hyperlocal targeting. So in our definition, it's our company's definition, it is an improved ability for people to be targeted on the basis of using device IDs, wherever they happen to be using GPS data, with an arsenal of new tactics, and leveraging programmatic tactics and technology. And we'll get into a few use cases in a minute or two, but the idea that you can now geofence or retarget, use geocontextual targeting, audience targeting with better data is really where we are today. Advanced technology, like I said, using GPS as opposed to cookie IDs, device IDs, post-back tracking, etc. And like I said before, you're able to bid on real-time, location-aware impressions on mobile devices today, which should radically change the way that you're able to think about advertising for your business or your customers. So I think, summarily, this is the moment when proximity turns into engagement. And I guess I will go through a few examples. So the first use case, and what we wanted to do here is we wanted to think about a combination of a location tactic, targeting tactic, with a use case or so, an example where you'd want to get your message in front of people. So it may be a little hard to read, but the idea here would be that you can geofence Madison Square Garden maybe after a Rangers game, and the Hotel Pennsylvania across the street would potentially be able to send you an offer. Maybe you want to book a room, maybe you want to have a drink at the bar, maybe they just want to make you familiar that there is a hotel there for next time. But I think there's three keys here. One is you're getting in front of like-minded audiences. They're all Ranger fans, whether you're a Ranger fan or not, they probably share a lot of the same interests, etc. The messaging can be highly relevant. Come visit us after the game, and timeliness is key. It's in the moment after the game that you're trying to drive behavior. The second big example, we had dinner with folks at Prodigy last night who were trying to do this, good guys, but the other would be to use geocontextual targeting. Somebody who's in an auto park or a collection of auto dealerships is more likely than not to be in the market for a car. I think, to show them an ad in that environment does a couple of things. It offsets the risk of showrooming, or I've done this before. You go to a dealership, you're waiting, you see the sticker price, you're comparing that to other dealerships. This can help at least mitigate that a little bit. And I think the keys here are, interest is inferred. Location infers that you're interested in a car. You're potentially in a market for a car against heavy competition, and message relevancy is key. So the last use case was really a local example. This can be what I would call a regional example. And then the national example would be a big box grocery store. So out on the East Coast where I'm from, Stop and Shop. I know Vons is big out in California. But these guys have an opportunity to both retarget and track conversions. They can utilize first-party IDs to capture that audience and end up using that as a retargeting audience. Conversion or goal tracking can be used using post-back URLs. And then really it furthers a retailer's goal. So whether they want to incent people to use coupons, come in store, try a different product. The keys here are that, again, interest is inferred, in-store traffic is able to be driven, and proximity is key. So like I said, I think, when it comes to Centro's definition of hyperlocal targeting, I think it's nice in the sense that it addresses old and new challenges. We feel like it's a ripe opportunity. And what we wanted to do was take a couple minutes. Please don't leave. We're going to have Rako Vidakovic come up, my colleague at Centro. We're going to show you a live demonstration of hyperlocal targeting. We've been able to geofence the Moscone Center, and why don't you come up and get started.